and we're going to talk about we're going to talk about companions and mounts in combat. We're going to talk about card chases. Let's rev up our engines. Alright, now we're going to keep it to the background. But let's continue here. Now, we touched on this earlier as we were going over what are some of the differences, the broad rules that you can expect. Because, look, this is all very straightforward. It all comes down to roll a 20-sided die, add the appropriate modifier, meet or beat the arbitrary number, and there you go. Are there some modifications to it? Yes. Is it beyond your ability to memorize or ask for help? Absolutely not. This is super easy. This is a fun natural extension, arguably an improvement to many of the things in D&D 5e, and we'll see whatever the new D&D comes up with, or what's out in DC 20, or Tales of the Valiant, other things that we were talking about. So we had talked about companions, and that you can have companions. I have it highlighted here because it also keeps the page from blinking and reloading. So if you have a companion in this system, there are things that you are still commanding it to do. So this is meant to be more of an extension of the character than necessarily you trying to micromanage a lot or bogging the game down with a lot of extra things, as you're like, all right, well, I get all my actions, and what should my companion do? And then I got to balance that against what the other party members are doing, let alone if they have companions as well. Because you can see that these are things you're working with your companion. And if you have a character that doesn't have a companion, you don't even need to worry about this section here. Outside of combat, they can be commanded to perform tasks that would be normal for any other creature of their type. They obey the command automatically, provided doing so does not put their life in immediate danger. When not commanded, a companion follows their hero wherever they go to the best of their ability. A pretty good passive mode. During a chase, a companion does their best to keep up with their hero and does not need to make ability checks or saving throws to deal with complications. A companion can be commanded during a chase but can't perform any actions that a hero wouldn't be allowed to perform within the rules for the chase, and that's in the next section, so we'll get to that. When a hero is incapacitated or not present, their companion acts according to their own instincts. The GM can allow the character's player to continue to control the companion, or the GM can control the companion. Fighting from horseback isn't common in the modern age, but horses are impressive all-terrain vehicles and can provide characters with a serious edge in a fight when extra speed and mobility are needed. Only a creature specifically trained to accept and be directed by a rider can serve as a mount. Animals not so trained typically attack or flee if a character attempts to ride them. In combat, a mount moves and acts on their rider's initiative. The mount moves as the rider directs them, but can be commanded only to take the dash action, the disengage action, or the dodge action. Now, if you don't know what those are from D&D, you can also read about them in this book. They're there for you to reference. Do you have to memorize all of them? No. Why would you ever be expected to do that? You have my permission to not look at this and go, well, I don't know. A Whoops All Rangers game would be fun, says Big Slam. A combatant making ranged attacks from a moving mount, as from a moving vehicle, has disadvantage on their attack rolls. Yeah, if it's still overbearing, I can turn it down some. I still have some more room on the slider. Thank you for letting me know. Falling. When a character falls a distance greater than 10 feet, they take 1d8 bludgeoning damage for each 10 feet fallen when they land. If they take any damage from a fall, they land prone. That's the same as 5th Ed. Depending on the circumstances, the GM might allow a combatant to make a strength athletics or dexterity acrobatics check to reduce the damage taken from a fall, or to avoid all damage by interacting with the environment to slow or arrest their descent. You know, like you're falling and you grab onto the convenient branch that's sticking out from the cliffside. Hey, here's the streamlined update to suffocation. Any creature that needs to breathe and is deprived of air is subject to suffocation. A hero can hold their breath for a number of minutes equal to their Constitution modifier. Once their breath runs out, they must attempt a DC 15 Constitution endurance check at the end of each turn. On a failed check, the character is reduced to 0 hit points, but instead of making death saving throws, they must attempt a DC 15 Constitution saving throw at the end of each turn. If they fail 3 saving throws before being rescued, they die immediately. That is a nice, succinct suffocation. Thank you. Visibility, dehydration. These are things that might come up. I'll let you read about them. I want to get into maybe more of the juicier rules of this system. A combatant can attempt to hide from others by making a dexterity stealth check. Until a hiding combatant is revealed or decides to leave hiding, another creature actively looking for them must contest the combatant's check with a wisdom perception check. A creature not actively looking, but which the GM determines could reasonably detect the hiding combatant, given the circumstances, is allowed a passive perception check to discover the hiding character. Applying and escaping restraints. A combatant can have their limbs restrained together, can have a limb attached to a nearby object, or both. A character who wants to apply restraints to another combatant that is not incapacitated must either be grappling with that combatant or have the combatant submit to the process voluntarily. If a creature is grappling, apply restraints requires an action and a contested athletics check. Strength athletics. Against the target's choice of strength athletics or dexterity acrobatics. If the target is incapacitated or submits to being restrained, success is automatic. Once bound by restraints, a character has the restrained condition. Makes sense? The character can attempt to escape using an action and a successful strength athletics check to break the restraints. A dexterity sleight of hand check to slip out of the restraints, or an intelligence security check to defeat the restraints by lock-picking or some other clever means. I like that. Pure strength, not just like acrobatics to escape the handcuffs or whatever, a sleight of hand, or an intelligence security. Yeah, big Sam, I'm gonna break these cuffs. You can't break those cuffs. Watch me. I like the options here. I like the options. Concealing items. Seems pretty straightforward. You can read about it. It is certainly conditional. This is something that was brought about as a difference between 5e. Breaking stuff. There comes a time in nearly every hero's life when they just need to break something. Whether blowing stuff up with explosives, kicking open a door, or smashing through a security gate in an SUV, sometimes it feels good to solve a problem using brute force. Oh yeah, and then backhand the goon with the cufflink as an interpretive weapon. Armor value and penetration value. Now, if you remember, armor you get an armor class effective, right? An equivalent in this game. Armor works differently in this system, and we went over that in the last part. If you're just joining us and you want to know more, we can touch on that, but let's go on with this segment of it. armor value, AV, and penetration value, PV, are used in everyday heroes to represent the toughness of objects and the ability of weapons to break those objects. They come into play during combat when armor or cover is involved and when characters need to destroy objects of various kinds. Armor value is always compared to penetration value, with 3 general outcomes. If the armor value of an object is greater than the penetration value of the attack or effect targeting it, the object is unharmed by the attack and blocks attacks from passing through it. If the armor value of an object is less than the penetration value of an attack or effect, the object is destroyed or penetrated by the attack, and the attack can effectively pass through the object. If an armor value and penetration value are the same, it takes 10 minutes or more for the attack or effect to destroy the object, during which time the object blocks attacks from passing through it. So that would be kind of like you're hiding behind a stone pillar and it's being shot up. Well, if the bullets shooting you have a penetration value of 3, and your GM says, yeah, the stone of the pillar has an armor value of 3, then it'll get whittled down, but it's still there for a bit. In fact, here's the example given. Katie Page has closed and locked the door to a hotel bathroom to escape Mad Saw Max. But Max decides he wants to use his chainsaw to destroy the door. The chainsaw has a penetration value of 2, which is more than the interior door's armor value of 1. Mad Saw attacks the door and cuts it to pieces. Katie needs a plan B. Here's Mad Max! Or Mad Saw. In many cases, certain objects are specifically designed to destroy other objects. For example, a chainsaw is made to cut down trees, and a cutting torch is made to cut through steel. Such tools are often too slow for combat use, but they can cut through the materials they were designed to, regardless of armor values and penetration values. So, a handy-dandy reference chart here. Plate glass or a cloth partition, no armor value. If you're hiding behind a curtain, it might block sight. That's not going to block a bullet from whiz-zinging your way. Light interior walls, hollow core door, upholstered furniture, plywood furniture, reinforced glass is 1. Metal door, exterior wall, thick wooden table, bulletproof glass, sheet metal, car door and exterior is a 2. A brick wall, sandbags, tree trunk, light armor plating is 3. Engine block, concrete wall, heavy armor plating is 4. Earthworks bunker, battleship armor, massive stone wall is 5. These are suggestions. They are open for interpretation, maybe a little bit of bargaining, but don't hold up your game. If you're a GM, I'd have these values in mind, or at least a quick reference to the chart. This is an excellent way, so you don't have to worry. Like, all right, you roll to hit the door. Do I hit the door? The door has an AC of 10. I rolled a, 2 plus my modifier of 5. No, you don't hit the door. All right, I dealt nothing. Okay. I rolled to hit the door. I got a 10. I hit the door. All right, the door has 10 hit points. Min out damage with your Great Club. 1 plus your strength of 3. 4. Alright, you don't bust down the door. I roll again. I miss. I roll again. I hit and min out. It still has 2 hit points remaining because it dealt another 4 damage and it has 10. That can create drama, yes. That can also create aggravation. Or people say, this could very well just be circumstantial. You're welcome to take it as such. But are you here engaging in combat to try and knock down a door with a great club? Or do we realize that it's really just a minor baffle in what's going to ultimately happen, and we're really here for the chase, for the thrill of the hunt, for the combat to take place outside of of this character who's very clearly strong, trying to break down a hollow core door? Yes, Sierra, thank you. The rest of the party is looking at you in confusion. The rogue already told you it was unlocked and not trapped. Kicking open a door requires a strength athletics check. The DC for the check varies depending on how tough the door and lock are, as determined by the GM. Kicking in an interior door might be an easy DC 10 check, while kicking in a typical front door on a home is likely a difficult 20. For those of you who, if you don't know, maybe you're not around construction or you've never really paid attention, in modern times, people's front doors are made to be of sturdier stuff than interior doors. Most interior doors you will find they're just made of like plywood. There's a very simple like lattice structure that has two pieces of just like varnished wood and a handle on there. They tend to be very easy to break in or through. If you live in an older house, maybe you have a solid piece of wood as an interior door. And that's also why, if any of you have ever gone to Home Depot, Lowe's, Menards, or whatever else, and you look and you say, why is a bedroom door, this is going to be grossly misinterpreted, but $50, and a front door, which is maybe a little bit larger, why are front doors going for $200 or $300? There are reasons. The most common ability check used in setting traps is Intelligence Security. Characters can use that check for any type of trap or alarm they want to put together. A Wisdom Survival check can also be used to set up traps and alarms, but only in a wilderness setting. A character doesn't need to be proficient with those checks to set traps, but it certainly helps. It goes through the process, the hemming and hawing, which is fine. It's good to talk about that. That's going to set up the DC on the trap. Characters can detect traps in two different ways, passively or actively. Passive detection uses a character's passive perception check against the DC. The GM initiates passive ability checks, but players might want to remind the GM of their character's passive perception modifier if they think there might be traps around. Example: Kat Whitlock is exploring an abandoned warehouse looking for evidence of human trafficking. Being the stellar detective she is, her passive perception check is 15, a 10 plus your perception modifier. A bear trap hidden in the darkness to catch unwanted snoops like Kat has a DC of 13 to detect it. The GM tells Kat that she can see the dangerous bear trap hidden in the shadows. Then it talks about how you can do active detection, intelligence, security, wisdom, perception, and then some other scenarios that might be appropriate. Dealing with them, such as analyzing or disabling them, there's a process to those. And then there's sample traps. I don't need to get into those, but these are fun, good old-fashioned caltrops, a door gun, an explosion. There's an explosive trap, good old-fashioned spike pit, steel jaw trap, etc. Now, here we go. I love this piece of art. If this also doesn't convey the mood or the feeling of what you can get in Everyday Heroes, whether you know the characters, you like their designs, or you say, yeah, I'd play a character like that, or no, you'd never catch me dead like it. If this is not conveying the energy, the expectations, or how you can look at an event like this, then the book's not doing its job, and I'm going to tell you the book is doing a good job. Whether the heroes are engaged in a foot chase through a busy market, a high-speed pursuit through city streets, or a race between two helicopters in a slot canyon, the rule, and I don't slot shame on your canyon, can be of any variety or size. Okay, I am not a slot shamer. The rules in this chapter can be used to create fast-paced, narrative-driven chases, races, and combats on the move. The chase rules are intentionally abstract. The exact distances between all participants involved in a chase aren't tracked. It's assumed that everyone is close enough to interact in meaningful ways, but not so close that the chase would conclude. Then it's left to the GM and the players to take the events of the chase and describe what's happening at any given moments. The chase follows the same basic structure as combat. Participating characters roll initiative. The action happens during a series of rounds in which every participant takes a turn. On their turn, a participant can take a regular action, a bonus action, and free actions. A participant can take a reaction on or off their turn. Chases differ from regular combat as follows. Chases usually have a time limit. Each side in a chase tracks their progress using chase points. Chases don't use surprise. All participants are assumed to constantly be on the move. Each round features a complication that the heroes have to deal with. All checks and saving throws made in response to complications typically use the same DC. Do you have to memorize this list? No. Are you expected to? No, you shouldn't be. Here we go. Let's start a chase. A chase starts when one group decides to run away and another group decides to pursue them. The rules assume that both sides have a reasonable chance of succeeding at their goals. Participants that are fleeing are the prey side of the chase, while the participants doing the chasing are the predator side. Now, if any of you have ever watched the Lego movie, you'll be very familiar with chase sequences and chase scenes, and even how close it is in a good chase. The GM then announces the chase DC. This is the default DC for all checks and saving throws involving complications during the chase. Everyone then rolls for initiative, with each hero rolling their own initiative and the GM rolling for NPCs as normal. Participants act in initiative order after each round's complication is introduced. A combat can turn into a chase when one or more opponents decide to flee. If the NPCs are running, the GM should announce they are fleeing at the start of a round. If the heroes make a run for it, all the players need to agree that fleeing is what their characters want to do at the start of a round. If the players are split, the GM can either let some of them escape freely while continuing the combat, have all the NPCs pursuing the fleeing characters, or split the scene into a chase involving some of the characters and a combat involving the others. Once one side has decided to flee and the other side has decided to give chase, play out the current combat round. Participants on the prey side can't make any attacks, instead using their turns to try and get away, and likely using the disengage or dodge actions. Participants on the predator side can attack freely. Once the final round of combat is done, start the next round using the chase rules, keeping the same initiative order from the combat for the chase. That sounds pretty simple so far, pretty straightforward. During a chase, each side keeps track of chase points, which start at 0. The participants on each side are aiming to earn points for their side while avoiding giving points to the opposing side. In a race, each racer, whether an individual or team, has their own chase points. If a complication during a race would normally give the side opposing the hero a chase point, it instead deducts a chase point from the hero's side. As in combat, a chase is broken up into rounds, during which each participant can act once. The GM can have NPCs act as a team or individually in a chase. Heroes always act individually in their initiative order. Most chases last a fixed number of rounds. At the end of the final round, whichever side has more points wins the chase. The GM decides whether to disclose the time limit. Example: a group of gangsters tries to flee when the heroes burst in on them, racing for the exit of their hideout. The GM decides that it will take 4 rounds to reach the exit, at which point the chase ends either with the prey side escaping into the bustling city or with the predator side cutting them off at the door. Because everyone involved knows that the chase will be over if the gangsters get outside, the GM tells the players how many rounds the chase will last. And in certain situations, a chase can end before reaching its turn limit. If all the participants on one side are completely incapacitated, that typically ends a chase. The GM can also end a chase when one side gains an overwhelming advantage in chase points. At the start of each chase round, the GM announces a complication, either an obstacle that must be dealt with, a hazard, or a situation or circumstance to be overcome, a challenge. Complications set the stage for the action happening in the chase. Needing to navigate around boxes, dealing with heavy traffic, traversing rough ground, spotting a fruit stand dead ahead, and trying to make time on a wide open freeway are all examples of complications. At the start of each hero's turn, that hero must deal with the round's complication before taking their action for the round. This takes the form of an ability check or saving throw, depending on the type of complication. The GM can use their discretion to allow heroes to ignore complications that shouldn't reasonably apply to them. And in some kinds of chases, only designated heroes roll for complications. For example, in a car chase, complications usually only affect the driver. NPCs don't need to make rolls for complications unless the GM decides they should. In most cases, the hero's roll determines how much better or worse they are doing than their opponents, and the friendly NPCs in a chase are just along for the ride. If the round's complication is a hazard, each character affected by it must make a saving throw of a type determined by the GM for the hazard. The DC is equal to the chase DC unless the GM selects a different difficulty. Use the following guidelines to resolve the saving throws. On a failed save, the opposing side gains 1 chase point. If the save fails by 10 or more, the opposing side instead gains 2 chase points. On a success, the character is safe, nothing happens. If the save succeeds by 5 or more, the character's side gains 1 chase point. So this is a holding steady, which isn't bad, though if you want to succeed, you need to be good at what you're doing. Good luck or good skill. If the round's complication is a challenge, each character affected by it must make an ability check of a type determined by the GM for that challenge. The DC is equal to the chase DC unless the GM selects a different difficulty. Using the following guidelines to resolve the ability checks. On a successful check, the character's side gains 1 chase point. If the check succeeds by 10 or more, the character's side gains 2 chase points. On a failure, the character muddles through, nothing happens. If the check fails by 5 or more, the opposing side gains 1 chase point. Once the round's complication is resolved for each participant in a chase, taking a turn is mostly the same as combat. Chase participants can attempt to attack one another, subject to special limitations. Additionally, characters can undertake 2 special actions available only in a chase. This is where we saw brace and gain ground that was mentioned before in the quick overview. A character's focus on the chase environment allows them to get ready for whatever's coming next. When a character takes the brace action during a chase, they have advantage on the next ability check or saving throw they make involving a complication. Using the brace action is a safe and easy choice if a combatant isn't sure what they can do to help their side. You know, that's the hold on to your butts kind of a thing. Gain ground. A character can try to gain ground on opponents during a chase either by making things more difficult for those opponents, or by making things easier for the character's side. A character who takes the gain ground action undertakes an ability contest between them and one combatant on the other side, making use of specific gain ground options that are part of the current complication. If the intent is to hamper the other side, the character chooses which combatant can test their check. If the intent is to gain an edge, the GM chooses who opposes the character in the contest. Pardon me. If the character using the gain ground action wins the ability contest, their side gains 1 chase point. If the character loses the challenge by 5 or more, they botch their attempt and the other side gains 1 chase point instead. In the event of a tie, no chase points are awarded. Each complication, presented in the Chase Encounters section in Chapter 5, has a list of suggested actions that can be used to gain ground, and which make sense for the environment of a particular chase. The GM can provide this list to the players to let them know what kinds of actions are possible, and players can also come up with their own ideas if the GM agrees that they make sense for the situation underlying the chase. Here's our example. Dexter LaFontaine is running from a pack of criminals and ducks into a crowded market in an attempt to blend in with the crowd and lose his pursuers. Dexter takes the gain ground action and the GM calls for a charisma stealth check, contested by a wisdom perception check by the nearest criminal. Dexter's result is a 15, while the criminal's result is only 10, letting Dexter successfully blend into the crowd and earning his side 1 chase point. Now you'll see, you might go, wait, a charisma stealth? Hey, Family Fantasy, what's going on? Good to see you, my friend. That is part of the story of the situation. This is a mix of charisma and stealth because you're trying to blend in, you're trying to look normal. This is using that attribute and that skill. So it might mix up the classic dexterity stealth or charisma deception or something like it's a fusion of the two. This is a good example showing a custom call for what is being sought to happen. And I like that. There are some limitations, and if you want to remove those or enhance those, you may. But this is meant to keep things tight, to keep the spirit of the chase alive. A chase isn't really a chase if one is very clearly the winner. Why do you sit on the edge of your seat when watching a fast-paced movie? You know, a Fast and Furious, a Top Gun or something? Is it because there's huge amounts of distance, or you have time to meticulously plan something? Even if it's a slower chase, like a submarine hunt, there's still a threat, and they're close enough for a submarine that action will still happen, that there's a presumption that there's a consistent danger. If you don't want that, then don't have that for that particular chase. But if you're wondering, okay, well, why are broadly melee attacks taken off of the list? Think about the spirit of a chase, especially in an action movie, in comics. if you're even reading in a novel about a chase? What keeps it exciting? What is that adventurous spirit? What keeps everyone paying for their whole seat, but only using the edge? So there are some rules to consider, some modifications. Take them off the table if it's not appropriate. Or enhance the ones that are there and say, you know what? This chase is actually everyone is in fact kung fu fighting. I remember. So before the big project, I believe, of Ruby, Monty Ohm was doing a series of just self-made computer generated shorts, and one of them was called Dead Fantasy, which I think took the Dead or Alive fighting game franchise and mixed it with some Final Fantasy stuff. And I remember in one of those, it was kind of a chase because the brawl took place on a falling tower. And so the opponents were jumping and maneuvering among the debris that was falling. So it was a chase. You could make progress or lose it, but there was conflict happening. That might be an instance where you allow for melee combat. You bribe the misfit with shinies? She would probably take some shinies. She could use it for the orphanage. Also, hello Survival, in with a triple howdy. And Sierra Echo says, because the seat is mysteriously sticky and the edge is slightly less so at my theater, question mark? You might need to have a conversation with management. Unless that's how you're leaving it, in which case you need to have a conversation with yourself, or look inward or upward at some higher power for guidance. So there's other things now. If you are listening, awesome. If you go, oh, words, wall of text. What is this? That's fine. Work with your GM and take things one step at a time. Yes, it's an exciting chase, and we understand that. That is our fixed moment in time, that we are presuming that is the case. And just like with any role-playing game, you have to take a minute and consult a rule. Mightn't you get one wrong? You might. And it's okay. I'm here to assuage those fears or concerns. Just because I was saying words doesn't mean that you are expected to memorize the rules of a chase. What can we walk away? What is the gist of this? The gist is usually we are focused on the actions of the heroes, and the successes or failures are what empower the chase, and we're keeping the focus on the players and on their characters, their heroes, instead of expanding it and worrying about a lot of external minutia. You can bring in the minutia, but at its heart, let's look at the players who are here at your table, who are sitting down and are here for the story, for the excitement, and want to roll dice, and we'll let that in part decide the success or the failure of the chase. And if you want to spice it up with something else, please do so. But that's the simplistic reduction. That is the gist. Keeping it short and sweet, like the rules of suffocation, which could make your life short, but maybe not so sweet. You can drop out of a chase. You can end at the time limit. I'll drop out. Or one side is winning by a predetermined amount. So, you know, it's like calling the soccer game. You know, you have it's the mercy, right? If the soccer game gets to 30-2, you might say, all right, when we hit to 31, we're gonna end the game. I've arbitrarily decided that if there's ever a 29-point difference between the two teams, we're just gonna call it there. Going from a chase into combat, just like you can go from a combat into a chase. Fleeing again, you can go back and forth. Vehicles are a big part of action cinema, and they can play a number of roles. The most prominent use of vehicles is in chases, but they can also play a part in stationary combat encounters. The interior or exterior of a vehicle might even be the setting in which a combat takes place. Of course, vehicles might also simply be a means of transportation, be part of a hero's image, or serve as one of their emotional attachments. Each vehicle has strength, dexterity, and constitution scores and modifiers. Strength measures a vehicle's power and acceleration, dexterity is its maneuverability, and constitution is its overall durability. These ability modifiers are used in certain roles made by drivers, with the rules specifying when the modifiers are to be used and how. Typically, the driver of a vehicle makes rolls for that vehicle. Traveling speed is a rough measure of how fast a vehicle is currently moving. Traveling speed most often comes into play during a crash or impact and is divided into 5 categories grouped by actual speed and mph. The following conditions are analogous to conditions such as distracted and frightened that apply to creatures, but they apply only to vehicles. Some vehicle conditions are temporary, while others are permanent. A permanent condition requires repairs before it can be removed, while a temporary condition lasts until the effect or circumstances causing it come to an end. Conditions caused by physical damage are always permanent. Some vehicle conditions escalate over multiple levels, each of which are cumulative. For example, a vehicle that has 2 levels of the body damage condition has both disadvantage and a -2 penalty to Constitution saving throws. When a vehicle no longer has enough functional tires to operate safely, it has 2 permanent levels of both loss of control and loss of power. Damage to a vehicle's exterior and physical framework covers 3 levels. Minutia, charts, reference it if you need it, and if you don't, it's here because this game setting and system understands vehicles are a part of action movies, of hero movies, of modern life. And it wants to give you tools that maybe you don't use every session, but they're there. You can reference them. Kragar says if a soccer game gets to 30-2, then it would be a mercy, right? So there are some extra rules here on driving a vehicle. Contest between them. Stunts. Vehicle stunts involve driving or piloting a vehicle in some manner it wasn't explicitly designed for as part of its normal operations. Performing a stunt requires dexterity vehicles check with a DC set by the GM. So there's more here. Conditions for it. Is it high speed? Is it low speed? What's happening? This is in itself its own small system. Again, you don't have to memorize all of these charts. When have you ever memorized all the rules to a TTRPG? Now, if you're playing, think of it this way. How about I say this? In Dungeons and Dragons, you have wizards and clerics. Wizards and clerics have spells. Spells do many things, many different things. It can be difficult sometimes to memorize all the things that your character, who's a wizard or a cleric, can do. You don't have wizards or clerics in everyday heroes. Now, similar to a wizard, you might have a hacker. The intelligence characters have plots or plans, and those are the cool things. Those are their mind tricks that they can do. They're not spells. But think about it this way. If your character is a driver, especially an expert driver, this is your spell book. Now, do you have to memorize every spell? You could. Many wizard characters and cleric characters memorize all the spells that they can use. Not all of them, and it's not really expected that they do. Think of it this way. If you are a vehicle haver in this game, especially one who you're the getaway driver, or you enjoy the chase or other things, consider this your spell book. Does doing that help ease your concern? because there's so much more in this system that is streamlined and makes a lot of sense. That if you want to complicate it and try and take on looking at charts or cross-referencing things, well, here you go. This is a part of your character, but instead of being a caster, you are a driver. And you can go out of your way to memorize these, or simply have them handy in the rulebook as a GM or as a player. But you'll see that there are examples, things like what happens if your vehicle falls out of a helicopter, because that can happen in a movie, in a comic, in a novel, in real life. What happens if your vehicle is damaged? What happens to vehicles in combat? This can be a whole other thing. If you were to just learn Dungeons and Dragons as barbarians and fighters and rogues, it would seem like a whole new rule set. If you go, whoa, there's a warlock that gets to cast 2 spells? How do you memorize all that stuff? Spellcasting is its own whole other game. Hi, Craigar. Good to see you. Now, will something like this come up in our Everyday Heroes game of Apples to Oranges? Yes. Do I expect my players to have to memorize all of these rules? No. Though, Big Slam, if you look this over and you have a more comfortable understanding of vehicles, that can make things easier, because you either know where to reference it, or you've practiced and you're familiar with chases or how your vehicle would work. Also, Vesric, hello, Warlocks on motorcycles. That's kind of like card games on motorcycles, if I recall correctly. Oh, there you go, Sierra Echo. I will double your experience points from the next adventure you go on, if you beat it. Yes, Warlocks whose patron is the heart of the cards. That allows them to do a great many things. Oh, geez, Sierra Echo goes on an epic adventure? This is it all comes to this. Can you defeat the dreaded Hallister Blackcloak? Only a 19 or greater can defeat it. You attack with advantage, adding a +6 modifier. Stops on a 20 or a 13. Sierra Echo has in fact defeated Hallister Blackcloak. The comet was with you. And you are going to get 12,000 experience points for it. Hi, Coffee Cat. Let's give a shout out to a fellow streamer. Coffee Cat Presents. So there we go. And so, yeah, welcome, Coffee. I hope that you're having a good evening. Thank you for coming by our Everyday Heroes review. We're currently, we're talking about chases. We're going over vehicles. And there are similar rules, by the way, in Cyberpunk Red. Coffee Cat, have you considered... I might be teasing an upcoming project of yours. Coffee Cat, would you ever want to present a Cyberpunk Red game on your channel? You do have plans to play Cyberpunk for sure. Well, play or run? Would you want to be the one running it after the current VTM game ends? Now, Coffee Cat had a... you would run it? Coffee Cat had an exciting chase sequence in Cyberpunk Red. And of course, as you'd expect in a near future or futuristic setting, you still get vehicles and chases. So you would find similar rules in Cyberpunk as well. So all things to look over. If you're going to use vehicles, here's a section. If you're not using vehicles or you're not going to worry about it, don't worry about it. Now, this is stuff that we'll talk about in another workshop, because playing a game is different than being the one to run it. So this chapter, we're not going to worry about this chapter. We went over really the big rules differences or the considerations. In fact, if you want, consider these expansions to the Dungeons and Dragons rules. How is that? Does that make it easier? Does that make this more palatable for you? Because take any of these and just turn it into a D&D equivalent in your world, and these rules will still work. It'd be set closer in timeline to the 2077 game, maybe a couple years before, but still use the red mechanic. Well, yeah, the mechanics, you can use the mechanics even for like a 2020 if you wanted to. The mechanics themselves work really well. But I know you have a lot of experience with the story in 77, so if your story, is by it, around it, leads into it, or is parallel to it in some way, that could be a lot of fun. You can play around with a lot of concepts or give some teases at things that are seen or even not developed or underdeveloped later in that game. Yeah, it'd be chariot chases instead of car chases. Yeah, there you go, Big Slam. Wagon chases or things along those lines. Exactly. So, easy peasy. There's nothing about the... Well, you look at it, oh, look at all those charts. There's literally 3 charts and they're yellow. Unplayable. Heap of garbage into the dumpster. I'm going back to Dungeons and Dragons. Come here. Little, come here. Believe in yourself. You can handle 3 optional and yellow charts. Don't resign yourself to just the familiarity of what you know and continue to repeat the same thing over and over again. I believe in your literacy. I believe in your ability to say, oh, I'll just look that up because I don't know it. I believe in you as a human being to not look at this and say, unplayable garbage. That's a hyperbolic take, I understand. For many, if not all of you watching currently or later on a video site, this is I hope, a fun little like effigy, straw man, hyperbolic example. But just because this doesn't exist in a system that you've already played, because many of you might have played D&D for a long time and this has never come up, don't disbelieve in it. This is simple stuff. It's still just as conditional as saying, oh, you know what? I forget if my Great Club does a D10 or D12. Let me look that up real quick. Literally unplayable Dungeons and Dragons. I have to reference a chart to remember the damage my Great Club does. 2 out of 10. Wizards of the Coast is a bad company and should feel bad. But I'm also not going to play any other games besides that. And that's it. I'm only ever going to play the same character over and over and over again. I will never change because I'm tired of learning new stuff. My brain can't absorb new things or learn things or adapt or have fun or think outside the box. It would be super street level. Yeah, and even the one that I ran for you all, Coffee, I mean, not so. Actually, that's a good example. In Cyberpunk, there is a whole chapter on hacking, right? On being a hacker in Cyberpunk. It's its own thing. It's almost like a mini dungeon crawl. Is it literally impossible to learn? No. It's its own thing. But not every game of Cyberpunk has to have like a hacking style encounter or combat. It can just be done through some skills, done off on the side, or that's a specialist that just does work as an NPC or something else. So when I ran Cyberpunk, I said, look, it exists. I won't tell you that you can't play a hacker, but I am not going to have that in our 3-part introduction game. We're going to keep it street level. We're going to worry about the pew-pews and the vroom-vrooms. And we're going to get into the environment and the culture, the dystopia, all this other stuff. I'm going to hit that. If you want to come back and play more Cyberpunk and you want to go on a hacking adventure, absolutely. But for what we're doing, there you go. So maybe Coffee wants to incorporate hacking here and there, or doesn't, or just wants to keep it. You know what? This is really a story about 2 street gangs in Night City. And you know, maybe some people have Chrome, but no one works for the corporations. No one's super rich. Keeps it very simple, very basic, very street level. And it's more about struggle busing in the dystopia of the city. Because that's just as cyberpunk as having a team of elite hackers all going on these hacking adventures. These sort of like cyber dungeon crawls. Lurkin loves, thank you, Heartless Halo. Yeah, yellow charts? Is that anything like yellow capsules? Just trying to figure out how you arrest the fall of the plane, says Bane. Sierra Echo says, I point the Prost towards the ruined remains of Hallister Blackcloak and ask it if it really feels lucky. Stop, by the power vested in me, by me. I make a citizen's arrest. Stop, I say. Yes, the old ways. I have them. I have my capsules. I just don't have prizes in them right now. And the yellow capsules will make a return one day. Big Slam says, speaking of that genre, hacking in Shadowrun is fun. No Hey, step into my office. No fun allowed? Who allowed you to have fun? This is tabletop role-playing games. This is serious business. My ego and identity as a human being is tied up with how strangers on the internet perceive what I do, which is in itself a contrivance to do something on behalf of strangers I don't know and will never meet, because I somehow need and think their validation is worth a damn. Excuse you, Big Slam. Excuse you. Oh no, survive. Oh no, that's the danger. Wah, 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 wah. Hi, you will never know. Good to see you. We got some epic music playing in the background here. Yeah, you're stirring the pot. Well, I'll tell you all what. I think this is a good rules review. Now, we'll stop that here for the evening. This was solid. This was consumable. We did have fun, and we smiled. And this was even after I got on a soapbox and gave an impassioned, fiery speech. Alright, it wasn't too fiery. But it was still fun.